With me now are the TUV leader Jim Allister, who supports a British exit from the EU, and the SDLP's Alban McGuinness, who wants things to remain as they are. You're both welcome to the programme. Jim Allister, first of all, are you confident in the Prime Minister David Cameron's capacity to renegotiate the UK's terms in the EU?
No, and I think you can judge by the quality and content of his letter that he's not serious himself about it, that he's going through a process asking for the minimum of things so as you can claim some sort of victory and recommend that we continue to be entangled in the EU. Whereas, for the future of this nation, we need the liberation that would come from loosening the shackles and escaping from the EU, because the EU is yesterday's failed vision. The future for a trading nation lies in the developing world. The EU GDP share of world trade is vastly diminishing. We now trade more outside the EU than within, yet we can't make a trade deal with anyone. Only Europe can do that for us. So it would be liberating to escape as a trading nation and to build our links with the rest of the world and to flourish, as well as regaining control of our own destiny and our own borders. Something very important in light of recent events.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because that doesn't really chime with what the business community in Northern Ireland seems to think. David Dobbin, who's the Group Chief Executive of Dale Farm and Chair of Intertrade Ireland, spoke on a BBC Radio Ulster business programme recently, and he said, while the EU is far from perfect, I can't see any upside in withdrawal. The thought that we'd leave the biggest free trade zone in the world as a region that's heavily dependent on agriculture and manufacturing and regional European aid, it'd be catastrophic for our local economy for us to even think of leaving.
Well, I think we have to take the health warning that the CBI, for example, who are cheerleaders for Europe, are heavily funded from Brussels. So they're doing their master's bidding. But let's be very clear. The United Kingdom as a nation pours £20 billion a year into Brussels. With the rebate and EU grants, we get back half of that. So every year it's costing us £10 billion. That's
Northern Ireland is a net recipient.
No, Northern Ireland is not a net recipient. Our approximate share of the £20 billion contribution is in the order of 500 million. Right. We get back 300,000 in agriculture, we get back 100,000 in structural funds. So even we, who benefit more than most, are a net contributor. But this isn't a parochial issue. This is a national decision to be taken by the United Kingdom as a whole, and we will play our part in that. And it would be wholly liberating, as I say, for the United Kingdom to recapture control of itself and its borders, and to open up the world expanse that lies out there for our trade.
In order to get the maximum benefits, it requires to be in the European Union.
It's nothing at all about being insular. My vision is to open our eyes to the rest of the world. The growth markets.
But by closing your eyes to the European Union.
Yes, but the European Union is moribund. It's in decline. It is said in 10 years' time, its share of the world GDP will be down to 22%. It is yesterday's story as far as world trade and growth is concerned. Look at the Eurozone and the catastrophe it has been in recent times, and yet people want to tie us ever closer to that, when out there is a trading world where we as a trading nation can flourish. Why would we chain ourselves to something that is failing and declining?
But I mean, you point out the difficulties that exist in terms of red tape in trading within the European Union. You scrap that and you try to set up, however complicated that would be, I'm not sure, new trade deals with other trading blocs elsewhere in the world. You'd be tied up with exactly the same kind of red tape. You couldn't guarantee that wouldn't be the case. So you'd be swapping one kind of red tape for another.
Because we would then, for the first time since we entered Europe, have the right to conclude our own trade deals. At the moment, no member state can conclude a trade deal with anyone. We would be back master of our own destiny, and the rest of Europe would still be trading with us, because we are running a £30 million a day
but the experts don't agree that it would be that straightforward.
Well,
you don't just wave your magic wand.
No. Well, let's consider Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty imposes an obligation on the EU in respect of any exiting country that they shall conclude a trade deal with them. So we are guaranteed a trade deal. But more than that, because they sell us more than we sell them, they will still be wanting to sell their BMWs in the United Kingdom and everything else, so they will be falling over themselves to maintain their trade wings with the United Kingdom, and meanwhile we will be able to expand our trade wings where our growth markets are.
Do you want to see a new network, Jim Allister, of customs posts across the border? Is that what we're looking at under your scenario?
I believe there's every prospect that if the United Kingdom leaves the EU, that the Republic of Ireland may well see the wisdom of doing that as well. But let's consider our trade. Let's consider our trade.
I mean, that's absolutely
you complain about the Republic of Ireland sticking its nose in our business. With respect, you're coming perilously close to sticking your nose in the Republic of Ireland's business.
I'm suggesting they might discover their economic interests right other than within the moribund EU. But let's consider the export situation in Northern Ireland. Last year, our exports were 14 billion. 8 billion of those were to the rest of the United Kingdom. The remaining 6 billion, only half of it was to the EU, and of that 2 billion to the Republic. The rest, the other 3 billion, was to the rest of the world. So already our vision and our dependency is outside the core EU. It's with the rest of the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. And that's the case even in Northern Ireland.
OK, Jim Allister, just a final one for you. Would you be concerned that people may ultimately make arguments, construct arguments, even make decisions, potentially vote even on an emotional knee-jerk reaction after things like the Paris attacks and the lockdown in Brussels, rather than looking at the economic facts as they are laid out over the months ahead? I'm
sure there'll be many contributors to how people make up their mind, but
that would be very dangerous, wouldn't it?
Well, look, it's a valid consideration for a nation-state to say, looking around Europe and what's going on, to say, isn't it common sense to control our own borders? Of course it is. And yet within the EU, we surrender that. So controlling our borders, controlling our destiny, deciding who we'll trade with, are all component parts of a vibrant, growing economy and a vibrant, growing nation-state. Okay. And that's what I want to see, rather than being tied and shackled to something which is dragging us down.
I suspect